I'm going to talk about a few hands I played today in a live cash game downtown in Cleveland. It was a 1-3 no limit game with a 300 max buy-in and it's a $100 min. Um, so in Cleveland you can straddle under the gun and you can also button straddle up to $15 in either position. Uh, so one of these hands actually has a button straddle that I'm going to talk about. So basically, I've played a lot of online, in my career, and over the last few weeks, I've been recording more videos online. But now I have started to kind of apply a lot of the things that I've learned online to live cash games. So I'm going to kind of just show you some examples of things that I've kind of talked about while I've been playing on Ignition, how it translates to live play. So I'm just gonna tweet out these links real quick, and then we'll get into the hands. So one thing which I think is relevant to this, um, when I go play live, I go to the cage and I buy 800 in chips. I always have a book bag with me, and I put the remaining chips in my bag so I can always have 300 on the table in the event I lose a pot, or just makes it easier to get money instead of having to wait for the dealer, or they don't want to get you don't want to slow the game down. You want to keep things moving so you can kind of just keep everything going. So get money instead of having to wait. Yeah, so I sit down with 800. Then the other players at the table kind of see that you're there to play, or they at least take you serious. Sometimes they think you're waiting for a bigger game, which I usually don't play more than 1-3 when I go play live. But yeah, I think it's in their subconscious if they're paying attention that they know you're not messing around on some level. You're prepared. So let's get into the hands here. Um, the first hand is this is my first time using this replayer, so we'll see how it goes. I This guy here had won a pot for me earlier in the session where I kind of overplayed a hand against him. He ended up turning two pair, but I was still betting and kind of got squeezed in a spot where I had to pay. So a lot of that money in his stack is mine. So I kind of have an image of a guy who's pretty aggressive, but I didn't win the big pot he did. So anybody who's paying attention, maybe not necessarily to what I'm doing or the hands that I'm playing, because I don't show a lot of hands, but they are seeing that I've put money in. So just remember that going forward. So he raises the 10, and the next guy folds, and this guy right here with only $115, he flats. Now, when I'm playing online, you'll notice a lot of times I like to squeeze people in this type of spot, and that's what I end up doing here. But the idea is to squeeze, get everybody behind a fold, and then if I can get this guy to fold who made the initial raise, chances are I'm way ahead of this guy. So it's hard for him to put money in. He puts he has a short stack to begin with, so I know he's not very good. So you can usually blow that guy off a hand or blow him out on the flop when they don't connect, or even if they do connect, they're nervous because they know it's all basically going in right then. So I elect to I raise to 45, and the guy right behind me here with only 200 flats 45. So that pretty much just ruined everything as far as my plans go. So we'll keep going now. So the Button ends up folding. Eventually. I don't know why it's not moving. I'm just gonna hit the replay again. I've never used this site, so this is new to me. Let me hit refresh, see what happens. Okay. So there we go. He raised, fold, call. I re-raised 45. Cold flat call from the cutoff. Button folds, small blind's going to fold, big blind folds. So he calls. He actually tank called. So we'll talk about that here in a second. So he tank calls. Now this guy isn't going to end up calling. He kind of gives you the shoulder shrug. Oh, there's so much money in the pot. How could I fold type of thing, even though he only had $125 to start the hand with. So he calls. Okay. So now there's $184 in the pot minus the rake. So I'm not in a real advantageous spot here, as you can tell. I'm four ways with not a very good hand. I tried to make a squeeze, but now we're gonna see what type of flop we can get and just kind of take it as a new step, new hand. We're gonna play the hand from the flop with the information we have, and then just kind of see what happens. So, okay. So the flop is Queen 8-3. So this is a really, really dry flop for the most part. It's not connecting. It only connects a gut shot and no flush draws. And the queen, if you think about the range of hands people might be calling with, okay, pre-flop, a queen isn't in many of those combinations. Ace queen, yeah, maybe king queen, and obviously pocket eights, yeah, pocket threes you would hope would fold. So there's a lot of hands that I beat, and I got the hammer because I 3-bet, which is important. So, uh, under the gun guy checks. Uh, the next guy checks who has 80. I elect to bet 80. So, here's my thoughts behind that. So, at the time, I had an idea that this guy had around that much. Um, I had thought this guy maybe had about half of my bet, and obviously this guy covers me over here. So what I'm thinking is that I can bet an amount that, and just so remember that these are live players. They're not probably paying attention to the pot size, how much is in my stack, how much is in the other players at the table stacks. Maybe they're putting it in terms of I have this much in my stack type of thing. Okay, so knowing that, I bet 80. So this guy here that cold called me knows that he's effectively playing, for everything, right? Um, this guy here then, who initially raised under the gun, he knows that I had a hand good enough to raise, or at least that's what I believe he has to put me on. Okay, so he has to take that information and know at least he can't beat a queen. So it's really hard for him to call me with anything that isn't a queen plus. Okay. So unless he has ace queen, I'm feeling really good about my hand against him. And if he raises me here, I can get off the hand. It's not that big of a deal. Obviously, I only had king high. The other two guys, if they were to put it in, this guy's already would be all in, but this guy, I would have to call him. I don't have a choice, right? So let's see what happens. So he ends up folding. The under the gun raiser folds, and then that guy folds as well. So I ended up winning a $184 pot minus my 45, without showing my hand. So I thought that was a pretty good example of applying pressure and using your perceived strength as your benefit to win the pot without having to show a hand. So if I were to guess, this guy back here probably had ace king, maybe ace jack, or some type of middling pocket pair that he didn't connect with. I think that this guy probably had a pocket pair as well, maybe an ace jack, ace 10, or ace suited type hand. Maybe a jack 10 suited. I don't know. It's hard to say. And who really knows what this guy has, and more importantly, who cares, because he's not playing for a full stack. I'm not going to give him credit for a hand ever. Pre-flop, um, especially when he's calling raises with, you know, $125. You're calling raises. You're calling two raises with less than a full buy-in. I just don't think that you're a very good player, and you can really exploit those guys and manipulate them throughout the hand. Okay, so that's that hand. Let's go on to another hand here. I understand why this hand's all checked up. Alright, so this hand I had ace queen in middle position, and I believe the player in this hand is right here in the 8th seat. So we'll run it through here, kind of talk about it at the fine points. I raise it, open the action up to 12, standard, and I get called by the cutoff there, and I believe everybody else folds. Alright, so there's $28 in the pot. Yeah, $28 in the pot. That's King A3. I elect to bet 15. And he calls my 15. Yes, I bet 15 there, and he called me. So, standard continuation bet. Haven't really learned a lot outside of the flush draw. That's a pretty dry board. It's almost as good of a flop as you could ask for, you know, just a standard C bet type of flop to hopefully take down the pot. So, that's where we're at here. Then the turn comes out. The 10 of spades does give us a gut shot, which would be nice, but I mean I'm pretty much drawn thin here. So putting him out of range of hands, I still don't really know what he has. I still want to try to bet to win the pot. It's hard for him to continue with anything other than a king if I apply pressure again. So I'm gonna go ahead and bet one more time. I bet 45. I tried to bet something, near pot, so I can set up a larger river bet for value or to try to get him off of a hand. So he calls, and the pot's at 148, and the river is a 3 of diamonds. So everything missed. It bricked completely. I can't see a scenario where he's continuing with a uh, a 3. So now we have to do an assessment of, I can make him fold his draws, his busted draws, so that's good. Something like an ace, uh, maybe ace 8 of spades, a ace X of clubs, any other type of club draw that he may have had. Those hands are going to fold to my bet. So he's already shown that he's going to put some money in, on the flop and the turn. But it's a question of what can I get him to fold that it beats me, right? So can I get him to fold queens or jacks or king jack, king queen? Probably not. Queens and jacks maybe. King jack possibly. It's tough though. a lot of these guys play their hands face up. They're not really thinking about what you have. They're just kind of, I have top pair and a pretty good kicker, so I'm going to put the money in, and if I lose, I lose, type thing. Any worse king than King Jack has playing the 10, which is something, to be very aware of, especially on ace high boards with a paired low card, and then like a king or a queen out there where they're going to share that high card as their kicker now because the board's paired. A lot of times I see guys make the mistake of bluffing that end when the guy's going to call just because his kicker isn't anything to worry about anymore because he figures that both players share that kicker on the board. Uh, Now, what I would say is that be aware of that and know that they're also going to call you when you happen to make two pair, like with an ace queen on the ace queen uh, X with a lower pair on the board. You can usually get some pretty good value from those guys there because they're going to call you with a hand that they normally would have folded had the board not paired, and you can reasonably deduct that they're not going to have that lower paired card to get to the point where they were in the hand, in my opinion. So back to this hand, so maybe we get the queens to fold, maybe we get the jacks to fold, maybe king jack, right? uh, I feel like ace king would have raised us, and we also have one of the aces, so it's tough. That's one less ace king combination, to talk about. Um, the king queen hand, I feel like it'd be tough to get him off that hand. So uh, jack nine of clubs, maybe he picked up a straight draw to go along with his club draw there. Jack nine of spades, same type of thing. Seven nine of clubs, nine queen of clubs. There's a lot of combos in there that you could fold out that you do beat, but you don't really want to go to showdown with this hand. Um, so our bet is really specifically geared at getting, you know, eight, uh, eight ace of spades, eight nine of spades, jack ten of clubs, queen ten of clubs, ten nine of clubs. We want to get those hands out of there because we we would lose to them if they were to call our bet. So that's kind of why I would lobby for firing the third barrel on this type of board. If they have anything under, let's say he made two pair on the turn, he had 10-8, and was peeling one on the flop, and he made two pair on the turn, and they just called our bet, and then that three hits to pair the board, and now we would have kings and threes in his head if we bet against. Then we get him to fold out the 10-8, right? So we go ahead and make a bet here of 90 uh, in relation to the pot. You know, pretty decent sized bet. Good enough for him to have to consider folding. I think some range that maybe would just check behind necessarily. But then once they're put to the test, they have to really think about it, and hopefully we can get a fold out of some of those hands that we already kind of talked about. So he ends up folding. I wasn't able to put it in here the way I wanted to without showing it, but he did have a seven of clubs, as you can see I wrote up here, and he showed it. So we were ahead of his hand anyway, but we didn't have to show our hand. He doesn't know that we bluffed. The table doesn't know that we fired three barrels with air, right? So we're feeling pretty good about ourselves then. All right. The last one I'm going to talk about is a straddle pot. Yeah. Okay. So this was actually a button straddle. This guy on the button straddled to six, but I wasn't able to play it back in that way. Maybe there's a different replayer that does this for me. I'm not really sure. Can I make it big? Yeah. All right. Let's do that. So, um, what happened was, so this guy folds, he folds, and this guy calls the six because he straddled for six. It's going to show that he raised for six. So that's not really what happened. So he calls the six. C5 and six end up folding. and I believe I raise it up to 22. So I make it 22. I think it's pretty standard. I want to punish that guy who limped. That's the same guy from earlier who I had lost that hand to that I was talking about. So there's some history with both of us. So I do make it 22, trying to get the button straddle to fold out and hopefully get him to follow suit, or at least we have position on him in the hammer, with our aggression pre-flop. So uh, the cutoff folds. He ends up calling here on the button for 22. The blinds are already out of the hand, so that doesn't. There's no impact there from them. And that limper under the gun does call. So looking at $70 to the flop. Um, and the flop is Queen Jack 10 with two hearts and the Jack of clubs to go with our King 10 of clubs. So we flop bottom pair on the board, and we have an open end straight draw with a redraw to backdoor clubs. So not terrible flop, but pretty wet board. It connects with a lot of hands. It's going to be kind of tough to get anybody off of a hand who has something. So how this goes is he checks. I end up betting 40, and I get called by the button, and the original limper folds out. So $150 in the pot. The turn is the king of diamonds. So if let's go through this now a little bit. Okay. So I have king 10 of clubs. Right. King 10 clubs. What? Do I have to do it in the thing? I haven't used this in a long time. Okay. Oh. I have to put each card. That's right. All right. The board is Queen of Hearts, Jack of Clubs, 10 of Hearts, King of Diamonds. All right. So now let's give this. No, we don't want random. We want to give him a range of. Okay, so he just called. He called our pre-flop raise, right? So here's where I'm at with this hand. If we go back to the flop, right? If he had ace king, do you think he would have flatted on the flop? I say no, mostly because of the hearts, and I think that he'd be more apt to raise on the flop with ace king. I think that's kind of where I'm at with that hand. So I also don't think that he just flats with aces, kings, queens, jacks, or tens, mostly because I have one of the tens. So that's all four tens if he had pocket tens. So I'm not going to say that I'm putting him on that kind of range pre-flop. So right there, we're going to discount all those. I do think ace queen calls pre-flop. Okay, yeah, there we go. I think ace queen calls pre-flop. I think ace king queen calls. Both king queens. I think if he had flop two pair with a queen jack or a queen 10, it's really, really tough for him to just call on the flop. But in the event that he thinks that I might have ace king, maybe he says, okay, I'm not going to raise here. So we'll throw the king jack in, we'll throw the king 10 in, we'll throw a queen jack in, a queen 10. Jack 10, yeah, definitely. So now like 10-9 suited. We know that it's not the clubs and it can't be the hearts. No, I think 9-8. raises us undoubtedly. So I'm going to exclude that from here. All right. So let's see what we got here. All right. So against that range, I'm 45% to win this pot. So what I'm thinking is, can I get him to fold any of these hands, at a decent? Because I mean, I have two pair. That's great, but obviously he's not folding an ace. That's the nuts, right? Um, can I get him off a king queen? Can I get him off a king jack? Can I get him off a nine? Can I get him off 10-9? Can I get him off jack nine? Right? I think that it's reasonable to think that you could get him off some of those hands. Uh, so when you couple in the fact that if you get called, now let's say, what kind of calling range are we going to get? 10-9 is definitely going to probably call. No, I don't think so. So let's say, um, 10-9's not calling. We get the jack 10s to fold. Yeah. So really, these are the only hands that I think could call us. Unless he has, like, yeah, can't have clubs. Can't have anything with a club in it, in my opinion. So we're in bad shape against those hands, right? But now remember, we're 45% against all those other hands that I think he could have. So that's why when you couple in the fact that there's $150 in the pot, he only has 103. I elect to go all in, and he calls pretty quick. So he quick called. I'm like pretty sure I was beat. And then for fun, he shows his ace queen. I'm in bad shape, and the river is the king to fill us up, and we are rewarded for betting, in my opinion. So that's how the day went